Welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jen Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
Gonna dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small,
Why, hey there, my fabulous listener. Welcome to episode 208 of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Today, we are talking all about hashtags. So thank you, as usual, for lending me your ears today. I know you have lots of choices out there, and I really do appreciate you making me one of them. If you are enjoying this podcast or you enjoyed this episode, I would love you to take a screenshot and share it on your socials and tag me at Jen Donovan, because that would be super cool to get to know you a little bit better as well. Of course, you can find the show notes for this episode at all the W's, social media and marketing.com.au/208. And before I get started on today's episode, how did you go with last week's episode 207? If you didn't listen to that one, then once you're finished here, slip back there and get some more Small Business Made Simple gold. My guest, Kathy Rust, talked about the power of words and gives us some pretty amazing advice on the use of language in our marketing as well. And of course, again, just before I get started on today's episode, if you're struggling with your content on your social media or in your emails or things like that, have you got hold of my monthly calendar of prompts? So each month I put out a calendar with a prompt for every day of something that you can talk about or you could do on social media. Everyone who's got it, well, not everyone, I haven't heard from everyone, but a lot of people who've got it have just said that it's just inspired them to do better on their social media and just given them some little inspiration of things that they wouldn't have thought to do and push them outside their content creation safety box as such, or their comfort zone, I should say. So if you haven't got that, then the link for that, of course, is in the show notes, or you can go to bit.ly/Jen September calendar. Look, I know that we're halfway through September already, but at least you could get some help for the last half of September. And then, of course, you'll be on my list too straight away, get the October one. Anyway, that is enough talk about things before we start. So let's get started. Like I said at the very beginning, we are talking about hashtags, those pesky little things that turn us upside down and inside out, trying to work out when to use them, why to use them, and how freaking many to use on what platforms. For little tiny things, they can cause very big headaches with small business owners like us. So let's analyze the little buggers some more on today's episode. So first of all, what is a hashtag and what is it used for? Well, I think we all know what a hashtag is. It's like, I would call it the noughts and crosses. I'm pretty sure there is a much more scientific name for the symbol, but it's like the noughts and crosses symbol. And what is it used for? Well, it's used to help you be found on social media, and it's also used for grouping particular subject matters or locations or campaigns together. It's the way of grouping similar content together so that the consumer of the content can find it all in one place. So if you keep that in your mind when you're thinking about what hashtags should I use, that might straight away make it a little bit simpler for you. So let's start here with talking about hashtags and thinking about the 5 different types of hashtags to keep in mind when you're using them. So the 5 different types are location, so obviously places and neighborhoods and cities and countries. Branded hashtags, so for campaigns or events, or of course your brand, so hashtag Jen Donovan, or hashtag I don't know, a campaign that you might be running, like Up Level in 2022. Industry hashtags is number 3. So your niche, what is your business niche, such as marketing, social media, digital coach, whatever that might be. Number 4 is community hashtags. So for a specific group of people, hashtag Black Lives Matter. as an example there. Number 5 are descriptive hashtags. So these are the hashtags you would use to describe the actual content of your post, such as if you had a post of a beautiful cat doing something ridiculous, you might hashtag cats of Instagram. So they're the 5 different types of hashtags: location, brand, industry, community, and of course description. And it's important you don't use just one type. And when you hear people say things, don't use the same hashtags all the time, this is probably at the crust of it what they mean. Like, you can't use hashtag cats on Instagram if your content is about trucks, and you can't use hashtag Australian Rural Business Awards 2022 if you're talking about Christmas, for example. Like, these aren't hard and fast rules, and you do need to test and measure what's working. But you can see when people say don't use the same hashtags all the time, it's because the content that you're producing and the content you're actually posting, especially when it comes to perhaps location and descriptive hashtags, will not be the same for every single post. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about hashtags as well. If you lined up 100 social media or marketing specialists, they'd probably all have a slightly different take on what hashtags you should use, what hashtags you should not use. So it's super, super important for you to test and measure for yourself, just not listen. For example, earlier this year, Instagram for Business, so not Instagram, but an account that looked awfully a lot like Instagram, said, only use 3 hashtags on your post. Well, the platform blew up. Only 3? We were like, what the heck? Only 3? But when you boiled it down, and this is what I'm talking about when I say that you need to think about these things strategically for your business, just not go, that's what someone said, so that's what I should do. Because the reality was that was great for that account and accounts like it, because it already had 14 million followers. So it makes sense, right? Like, they don't need to be found. They've already got 14 million followers. They just need their content to be found for the right things. So perhaps they just want their followers to actually see their content. So 3 might be great for them. But for accounts like ours that might only have 200, 500, 600, 3,000, 5,000 followers, 3 isn't going to get us very far at all when you go back to what a hashtag is for, and that is for grouping content together that is similar, for giving the consumer of the content a good experience, and also for being found. So again, just don't follow the advice you hear or read or see. Test, measure, polish, test, measure, polish. This is your responsibility as a small business owner. And even what I'm saying here today for you, test it for yourself. Don't take what I'm saying as gospel. You need to do your own test and measure. Okay, so next on my list to chat to you about is how many to use on what platform. Now, I'm going to talk about the 4 most popular hashtag platforms, which are Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So Instagram first. How many hashtags do you use on Instagram? Well, if it's all about being found, I'm going to say a few. But make sure, and especially applies for Instagram because you can use up to 30, make sure you split them into thirds. So whether you are using 30 hashtags, so that would be thirds would be 10, or if you're using 10 hashtags and thirds would be 2 3s and a 4, split them into thirds. A third of your hashtags should be branded specifically for you. After all, that's the whole point, and they should be under 5K, so have under 5,000 posts in them. Again, because if you are a small account, you are going to come up most likely when there are least amount of posts against a particular hashtag. The next third should be between 5K and 300K. So you can go big or small here in the next third. And the last third can be as huge as you want. Social media, marketing, hashtag Instagram, hashtag cats on Instagram. They can be as big as you want, but the chances of you coming up in that last third are quite minute. Happy days if you do, but you've got to understand, if hashtags are about being found, if you choose hashtags that have 15 million posts against them, then there's every chance that you won't come up for that hashtag. So how many, Jenny? Tell me, how many do I use on Instagram? So I would say for smaller accounts, up to 30. For larger accounts, I would say between 3 and 10. So you need to test and measure this for yourself. There are a lot of information out there to say the sweet spot is somewhere for smaller accounts is between 11 and 15. Again, go back to the 5 different types of hashtags that you can use: location, branded, industry, community, descriptive. And if you can fit all of those in and have quality hashtags that are, under 5K, between 5K and 300K and as big as you want, and you can fit that in between 11 and 15, happy days, go for it. If you can't, 30. I'm not quite sure there is any concrete evidence out there to say you are going to be punished for using 30 hashtags when you are allowed to use 30 hashtags. But again, we go back to making sure that all the hashtags you are using are fitting into one of those 5 and are appropriate for the post that you are doing. Okay, so next we are going to talk about LinkedIn. And when we are using hashtags on LinkedIn, we want to be hyper focused on the content and think connection. So not so much about location, not so much about, location or perhaps descriptive hashtags or industry or community or branded. We want to be hyper focused on connection when it comes to being on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn actually recommends between 2 and 5 hashtags, and I'd really highly recommend you watch for trending hashtags that you can jump on board with. Facebook, using hashtags on Facebook is like using them on LinkedIn rather than like using them on Instagram. Again, Facebook recommends between 2 and 5. And again, we are hyper focused on content and connections because that's what we want to come of using our hashtags. Twitter, between 2 and 5. Again, hyper focused on content and connections, and I would definitely be watching for trends that you can jump on. So that does most of the platform. Now, I will just say, obviously, hashtags are important on TikTok. Now, full disclosure, I have only just entered the realm of TikTok, so I am not a TikTok expert, but according to the research that I have done through Google, TikTok also recommends between 3 and 5 hashtags. And of course, we are making sure that they are hyper focused on the content that we are actually producing on TikTok, so that all that content is collectively together for the consumer that wants to consume that content. So I hope this episode makes it a little bit clearer for you and you start to think more strategically about using these little squirmy things called hashtags. But first, before you go and change up your hashtag strategy after listening to me today, I want you to do a couple of things. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to do an audit of the current hashtags you use. So basically, go to the platform you're using them on, click on the hashtag and go and see, are you coming up for that hashtag in the feed of that hashtag? If you aren't, then you need to ask yourself, why not? For instance, it could be a massive hashtag and has millions of posts against it, and that's just the reality that you're not coming up for that hashtag. And then you find the hashtags that, of course, you are coming up in for whichever way that goes. And then I want you to decide on the changes based on an audit that you have done. I don't want you to just go and change them willy-nilly now because you've listened to this episode. I want you to do an audit and I want you to make changes strategically based on what you have found. Now, just a caveat here, of course, just because you aren't showing up in the post that has millions doesn't mean you should stop using it. You just need to make sure that they're not the only hashtags you're using, going back to the third that I was talking about before. So no matter what number you use, remember the different types: location, branded, industry, community, and descriptive. And make sure that you are using a mixture of those so that you can get more traction, more reach, and hopefully, as we are doing all this work for, more quality leads of the beautiful peeps who will one day want to do business with you and buy from you. So I hope that has helped, because I know that this is a big sticking point for so many people out there. So that's it for another episode of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Thank you so much for your ears and listening in. If you aren't a member of my Facebook community called Like-Minded Business Owners, then jump over there. I'd love to meet you over there as well. But otherwise, I will see you for next week's podcast, episode 209. But in the meantime, if we're not hanging out on social, let's get social on social. You will, of course, find me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But whatever you do, remember, my small business peep, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
No time like the present. Tell it like you feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Yorta Yorta people, on which I record this podcast and conduct my business today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today as well.